to start.
Hello, hello, last people coming from the canteen. There is another event, so don't get mixed up. That are gonna be the demos from Product and Tech on the other side. So if you are over there waiting to move, no.
But we have the cooler event here because we now have our industry experts with us. So please welcome Alejo from Wallbox, Pablo from Golov App, Chris from ThoughtWorks, and Markus from Adevinta. Before starting to ask questions, I want to mention I'm not impolite having the mobile phone with me. It is just I have the Slido open for everyone who is behind the screens right now. So please ask your questions in Slido that we can also address them to the group of experts. And of course, everyone in the room will have the chance to ask your questions. I start with a really light one before I ask you to introduce yourself. So I get often asked as an analyst, what do you do? By family and friends, and it's always giving you trouble to explain them. But then they ask you, and what you're actually working on, and then data mesh. It is even hard to explain it sometimes for people that know what I do. But have you ever thought that it's like having a brunch with your family and friends, everything preparing some nice food for the table, bringing it to the table, and at the end you pick what you need and what you like to eat? This is how I explain it. But of course, this is not the level you're interested in, and therefore we will have more deeper questions to them. But first of all, I would like if you introduce yourself quickly. What's your name? What is your position? And why is it good that we have you here in 1 or 2 sentences?
Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon. So I am Alejo from Wallbox. I joined Wallbox a little bit more than 2 years ago. So we are a very young company, just 8 years old, and the data team is just 2 years old. And since some months ago, we started this data mesh journey. So I am sure we are not so experts as some of my colleagues here today, but we have already faced some of the challenges.
Hey everyone, I'm Pablo from Glovo. I think you all know what Glovo does, so I want to explain that. I started 2 years ago there, just when we decided to move into data mesh. So actually my role was to help with that transformation. And so far today, we only create data products. We finally transformed the organization. And these days I lead platforms, so that data mesh platform, machine learning platform, experimentation platform at Glovo.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. My name's Chris. I'm the head of technology for ThoughtWorks Spain. And I guess if you look at my fellow panelists, what they have to bring is great depth in their experience of data mesh. I guess you could say that I come with great breadth. So in my position, I work with a lot of different clients who have a lot of different experiences with getting going with data mesh. And so I think I have a bit of an industry-wide view. As a fun fact, I was actually one of the people who got to review the book Data Mesh when it was still in production, because I had a colleague who I was reaching out to and asking if there was anything I could do to practice my own writing or get involved in this process. And she said, "Oh, actually, I'm in the middle of this book. Would you like to take a look?" And so that's how I ended up being involved in that project. So I guess you could say that I've been involved for quite a while in data mesh, and so probably I'm a good person to answer questions about what was the idea behind this or where did this come from. But I think my panelists here are great people to answer. And how did it actually go when you did it for real?
Yeah, and I guess most people know me. I'm Markus, head of data strategy at Mobility from Germany. The reason that I'm on this panel is twofold. I think for one, when we sat together asking who should be on this panel, I was not the fastest saying no. And the second one, so I would call myself one of the early adopters, definitely in our company, because I'm a data scientist by training, and I was always very concerned that so many people were so far away from what I found super interesting. And the moment I heard about data mesh, there was a lot of clicks in my head that saying this is addressing what we actually needed. So I wanted to push this forward to the company, and I'm very happy that we're doing this now within Adevinta context.
Okay, so the first one, Pablo, goes probably to you. What are the key challenges that organizations typically face when adopting a data mesh approach, and how can they overcome these challenges? What are your experiences with it?
Okay. How many hours do we have? So for context, we started data mesh at a point where most of the data engineering was centralized. And it is very different doing data in a centralized manner than doing it in a federated way. And the way in which we need to think about the tooling for doing in a federated way, in which things can be created elsewhere, but they follow common patterns, is a very different paradigm. And the type of reliability and robustness that you need to build in the tools is completely different. And for us, it took us a while to get to that level of maturity and kind of engineering maturity to get to a point in which things have started to work. That's definitely one that we encountered. I think a different challenge as you start opening up the door is that things get out of control. And I think that governance in data mesh is something that, yeah, there are quite a lot written about, but I don't think anyone has cracked in a way that is working well. For that, we decided to invest on it. So essentially have people centrally dedicated to figure out how governance is going to look like, how we are going to integrate governance in our tooling, how to minimize manual governance of stuff. But it's difficult. It's definitely a challenge. And I wouldn't say that we are amazing at it. We survive, but there's a lot more we can do.
Thank you. So there is one more question. So I found a question I explained earlier, how to explain data mesh on a really easy way. But we had a really difficult question in our group earlier on, and we are happy to now be able to ask our experts if they can answer it. So there was data as a product often connected to the black box. So this is why I'm asking, is there a good answer?
All right, to what is a data product? So first I would say it's quite common when people start with data mesh to kind of want dictionary answers to things, because they think that if there's like a data mesh dictionary, I don't know, then that will kind of give them definitions that they can rely on, and that means they don't have to think about their own context, right? And I think the people in this room have been involved long enough, I'm getting nods, that you know that approach doesn't quite work. So I am going to give you an answer to the question, but I just wanted to put that as a disclaimer. I think the clearest answer to what a data product is a data set plus love, right? And by that, what I mean is there's actually a group of people who are looking after it, that are taking responsibility for it, they're caring for it, that are caring about how it's being used and the experience of the people who are using it, right? So it might be that in your context, it involves a data catalog, or it might involve a particular kind of data quality check or plugging into a certain governance framework. But in the end, the main thing is that there's some data where there's a group of people who are putting care and attention into making sure it can be used valuably. So it's not maybe a helpful one with deciding your architecture, but that's my definition.
So thank you. I would like to already start and open the floor for your questions. If not, I have many more.
Just a quick one on the data product, because I also heard this today. And by the way, I think data set with plus love is an amazing answer. So best you can run with it. It's amazing. I've asked myself a number of times today, because there were so many people that wanted to ask, like, what is a data product? What isn't a data product? The question is, why is this so important? Because I think most of you know at least one data product. So most of you would have something in mind that we say, I would call this a data product. Go with it. Like take this definition, start with it, make it work for this definition. And then afterwards, yes, enlarge it, like take stuff out. But like right now, if you already have something and you can solve your challenges for this respective data product, then you already gain something. I think if you work in 2 years on like the perfect definition, but don't have 0 data products by that definition, that's not going to bring us very far. So I'm a fan of defining things part way when you start, and like full way when you understand it.
And maybe I can add, as a product person, if you read on what's a product, you will find the same problem. There is not one definition for what is a product. It is what you make of it, how you set up your organizational structure, what users you have, how you sell it. At Mobile, for example, we have direct sales, the C2B. That is a business stream. I consider it a product. but my product managers work on software tools, and that is a product. So we have within Mobile different definitions, or in my head, I have different definitions. So unfortunately, there's no clear-cut answer for what's a product, and there won't be one for what's a data product.
And if I could just add to that, I think that's a great point for product ownership in general. I think it's not just the words data and product you should think about in that sentence. It's about the is. So like, I think actually saying, should this be a data product or should we treat it in this way is a more powerful question than is. Because is kind of passive, right? Is just like, okay, I'm not involved. No one's making a decision. We just want to analyze it and work out what it is. Whereas should implies you have to make a decision, you have to make a commitment, you have to decide to do one thing and not do another thing. So I think, yeah, saying should this be treated as a data product is an action-oriented way of handling it.
Thanks. Maybe this question would be better posed as a closing question, but I got the opportunity now, so here I go. Obviously, I think we all agree in the room that data mesh is something that needs to be sponsored from the top and then will somehow trickle down through the organization. But we're here together today talking about this, and we're going to go back to our local orgs and have a chance to evangelize people there. How could we be doing that? What actions or words could we be taking and using that can get us a bit closer to the data mesh, if there's such a thing as a progressive transition to it? That's the question.
Okay, so well, what I would answer you and related to the previous question, no, what is a data product? I always like first to be data driven, because sometimes in data we are not data driven. So and measure the impact of this product, and even try to quantify the ROI. For me, data mesh has a lot to do with considering data as a product, and this also means generating value for the company, reusability, and I don't know, you have read, there is a book, I really like it. It's from another book, which is, I think, Datanomics, and there's another book which it's by the ex-CDO, Chief Data Officer of Bankia, which is Data Value. It's both in English and Spanish, and there is a formula there for calculating the value of the data, and one of the key terms is reusability. Another for sure is quality, number of use cases, and also strategic relevance. Okay, so yeah, I would say that for me the most value that data mesh is introducing to the company is treating data as a product, because up to now data was just a byproduct, especially for many product and software teams.
On our case, when you're talking about evangelizing, I think that for us, it was about talking about people's problem that you were going to resolve with data mesh. It was clear, like, you hate it, like, and different people have different problems. As an analyst, you want to find the data, use it, and know that you don't need to go check the whole lineage, see step by step, see where someone screwed up, fix it, get the data set right, then use it. You don't want to do that as an analyst. As an analyst, the pain point that you want to fix is that the data is going to be available for you to find, and whatever decision you make on top of that data is going to be right. So you have that type of user earned. And if you go to more senior stakeholder, it's about, look, the cycle time that for the project that we're going to be doing is going to be shortening, because the time to data is so much smaller. The decisions that we're going to make are going to be more accurate. So for us, it was about, we had real problems that data mesh was solving. I think that if you go for data mesh because it's the next shiny thing to do, but it's not solving problems in the organization because your setup is good enough that you don't need it, then it's hard to sell.
Cool. So really good answers. I think the two answers I could summarize as being about the value addition that data mesh does. But the trouble with advocating for change on value addition is you don't have that value yet, right? So you're telling people, oh, we should do this thing, and in the future it'll be great. And That's great if maybe someone is at a data mesh day organized by their company where they've got a lot of support and enthusiasm around them. But if they're in a context where other people are skeptical or other people have not got the same time and attention to think about the aspiration, it's harder. So I think the first thing I often start with, if you can't make the return on investment based case, is around pain alleviation. And the two words I would often use or come across, one would be ownership. So the thing that I see going wrong most often is there's a really important thing and no one owns it. And that's something that everyone knows that that's not acceptable if the data flowing through it is important. Someone has to own it. And the other word I would often use, just to riff off your question where you asked what words to use, would be responsibility. So if we agree on a system where we know who's responsible for it, and I guess ideally it's the producer, to be consistent with data mesh, that's responsible for it. Those two things where you just make sure there aren't things that are unowned and people are responsible for the data that's going from them. I think that gets you to a certain point where you can deliver value quickly, right? There's no, important business metric that is broken and no one is even on the hook for fixing it. That kind of gets you organized enough that you can start to think about the data mesh superstructure where the data mesh effect really starts to pay off. But I think if you're with people who don't have enough time to be thinking about the big picture, pain alleviation is a good way to win some of their trust.
And I think most things that have been said, just like make it one more clear about the pain alleviation, but just be honest about like how hard it is to work with data and don't think as a data engineer. So like it is super hard to work with data, like especially in complex organization, everyone is constantly, I'm a head of data strategy. I constantly have to hear this isn't working. Why like does it take so long to get another dashboard? All these things are true. And it's not because we are like wrong people or making wrong decisions. It's because it's a very complex problem. And you have to make the connection from what are your pain points to like, how are you going to address this? And that should bring the motivation.
Great. We have a question from this side. I hope it's working.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So how do you deal in your organizations with governance and ownership of cross-domain consumer-aligned data products?
Wants to take?
I didn't know this was the advanced class. So I'll give my short answer. So the trick is as well, if there's a tricky question, it's actually best to be first because then you can give the obvious answer and then other people have to give the tricky answer. So I think what I would say is you have to make a choice about it. I don't think you can analyze the nature of your cross-domain data product and say, because it has 37% data from this domain or because it's constructed in this certain way, it has to be owned. I think you just have to make a choice as an organization. Do you own it on one side, in which case you've got a dependency relationship in one direction? Do you put it on the other side? Or do you even just say, this thing is somehow inherently a third domain and it's worth us creating space in our organization for it? So I think there's no deductive reasoning way of working at it. Just like you can't say, there's two systems that need to talk to each other. Which way should the API dependency go? Well, actually, sometimes you make it go one way, sometimes the other way, sometimes you create a third system. So unfortunately, I have to tell you that you're going to have to weigh up the trade-offs in your particular context, I think.
Yeah. With a good answer for being the first one. I think in our case, at least from our learnings, the first thing I would ask is, does it need to be a cross-domain data product, or we're just making something big that we are not choosing to split? Can we split that? Does it make sense? Like that's the first thing that I will look at. But then you have some truly cross-domain. Like for that, I'm thinking geography, exchange rates. No one has ownership of things like that. We in our case we have a central domain, which is kind of counterintuitive in some sense. But there are some data products that don't fit anywhere, and there is a small group team that has ownership of these shared products. But also in other cases, when these are multiple domains that touch it, but some of them are more interested than the other, we just say, hey, you have the first use case, you take the ownership, but you have a responsibility. So you are now the owner of this data product. I need to understand how other domains are going to consume it. So you take those responsibilities. So that's how we approach it. But there's no super right one-way answer. Yeah.
Find the owner. Sorry, there is a mic. The next question was here.
Yeah. Okay, so today we have discussed a lot about philosophical theories about data mesh and how everything should be working. But I think that there's an issue that most of us see is that we don't talk that much about the technical aspects of data mesh. Since you have implemented this in your companies, how are you actually creating data products? Do you have a platform that supports data products across the company? Do you give the freedom to the domains to implement data products as they wish, following data contracts? How do you produce data, let's say, outputs, outputs that you have in the company? So more like technical knowledge that you can share.
Well, as I said, we are just laying out the foundations. In our case, you mentioned a keyword, which is data contracts. So one of our main drivers of moving towards data mesh was this explosion of events on the software side. They were moving from a monolith to a microservice event-based architecture. And the first thing that we agreed with them is to make contracts. Okay, and contract can be implemented in many ways. It's not just a schema registry, which is very important to have a schema registry and be able to evolve the contract, but it's also to define the semantics, the ownership, quality checks, and so on. Okay, so that's the first thing that we have done. On the output ports, I would say metadata, data catalog can help a lot, and that's what we have by today. And for sure, you can evolve it a lot, and maybe Pablo can help us.
I want to answer your question of, do you leave, you let every organization do their own, every team do their own infra and their own thing? In our case, we tried to create a central platform that could help anyone create their own data products, but we didn't allow everyone to spin up their own infra and so on, because that's part of the benefits of data mesh, right? So we think that from a technical perspective, yes, you want to have federated, but at the same time have some sort of central control, so you can actually, through that central tooling, embed the practices that you want people to use. You have the power to control what can be done in the platform, control what cannot be done, prevent what you think that you want to stop. So I think it's powerful to put enough people working in a platform that can be used by everyone and accelerate them, because else you are going to be developing 20 platforms, and that's a big waste. Yeah.
So I have a question on Slido to also give the people on the screen a chance. And this is going to you, Pablo, as well, since you mentioned the technology maturity earlier on, and now we're also talking about the technology. And the question is, how should it be moving forward with data mesh, and how should specifically be the changes to the data engineering patterns you referred on earlier?
From the perspective of the data engineer, or, well, you don't know. I'll do my take on the question.
Is this an online question?
Mm-hmm.
It's a specific Sam is making the question, like on the data engineering discipline or patterns, what are the changes that you expect and how it's going to evolve this discipline with the data mesh, no?
Okay. Okay. It's actually a good question and very appropriate for the time we're on. That we see that our data engineers today are very generic in the sense that they can create data products, but they are technical enough that they are also software engineers, like they are somewhere in the middle. As we are evolving, we see that we are going to have, or we are having, engineers that are fully dedicated to platform, that are stronger on the software side. And then as we evolve our platforms and make them easier and easier and easier, you don't need the same level of data engineering skills. So BA engineers can already do the work of creating data products and so on. So as we democratize and make the platform lower entry barrier, you don't need so many super skilled data engineers in the teams, which those engineers are super valuable in defining how the platform needs to be, how this can be used by 20 teams, how this scale up the right way, what is the right user experience for you to create a data product in the fastest way possible, how can you define quality and so on. They are super valuable, far more for creating hundreds of data products, which is the scale we are on today. We don't have data engineers creating all data products anymore, so that's how it is for us.
I totally agree. In our case, what we did, we started with 2 domains, the most data intensive domains. And in our case, we embed 2 data engineers on those domains with the goal of driving this culture transformation and helping the domain teams be able to start producing data products. But yes, I see that data engineers will be moving forward towards maybe a more platform role and working together with domain teams as enablers. Okay, so like a consultancy team that you have in your company that helps other teams create and evolve these data products.
So just to riff off what you said then about, data engineers and platform and consultancy roles, I think the biggest thing that will change about data engineers in a data mesh approach is collaboration models. So I almost heard, I don't know if you've read the book Team Topologies. It sounded like you have because you were using the language. So I almost think that's a book that has nothing to do with data engineering in particular, but it's about different kinds of team and what kind of service they offer. So I think the biggest thing that is not strictly data mesh itself, but is necessary for data mesh, is for data engineers to start working together in teams and less being kind of lone and maybe lonely cowboy types, right? So I think there's a lot of people who are data engineers at the moment who have actually quite stressful careers because their organizations just call them in to fix this thing and tell them to go away again, right? So if we accept that data products are the way to organize our data, well, those data products are going to rely on having multiple people working on them. They're going to rely on there being more than one person who knows how that pipeline works, so that if X person is on holidays, someone can fix it without troubling someone's vacation. So I think it's the collaboration and ownership patterns and knowledge transfer, what kind of documentation, what kind of onboarding for a new member of the data engineering team or the data product team. Those patterns are going to be, I think, actually the biggest shift from a cultural point of view for data engineering to make data mesh possible. And to be honest, I think those are changes that need to happen whether or not you're adopting data mesh.
Agreed. Plus one also on the consultancy thing. I think that will be more important. I had the question recently, but if we build this amazing self-serve platform, then like what are we needed for? If you actually build this and none of your users need you anymore, thumbs up. See you in 5 years, and then you will probably see this differently. So yes, this consultancy model will be more important. But I see one more shift. From my perspective, a lot of data engineers actually build products for themselves. Because you're running the platform, you have to do all of the different input parts, you have to make transitions, and then someone else reads it, and then you might actually also not know your own user. So you're providing a lot of data. I think the shift that needs to happen is just you build a product and the platform as a product. You're actually building this platform for people, and that means you also will have to go and do product thinking. Think about from the perspective of the people that have to use your platform and make it as easy as possible for them. And that's also a shift in mindset, because it's a different thing doing it just for you. I don't know, you're very good in Scala maybe, but then there might be no Scala engineers at the rest of the company. So that's not helping very much. And yes, everyone can learn Scala or SQL, as I heard before, but maybe this isn't the best approach to upscale everyone else. So that should also be a shift.
So
we've been talking a lot about challenges, open questions, things to solve, things to do today. I would also be...
Sorry, please stop.
So yeah, we've been talking a lot about challenges and things that we have lined up to do and solve. I would also be curious to hear some of the early wins or success stories that you have to share as part of your transformation journey.
I think you've got the most data products in production. Maybe you should mention.
We actually started data mesh with one particular use case that had the least dependencies and at the same time had quite a lot of usage. I think that customer behavior, you remember that name well. So for us, we had a long story with that. Data customer behavior is essentially user interactions going through our app, and kind of the big thing we were trying to resolve is what the hell is happening on the app. Is kind of the type of business challenge that we had. So we had that data, but it was super lengthy to draw any conclusions. That you had to spin up a Thrift server, do a Spark job, and every time you wanted to answer something was super lengthy. So it took us 6 months to get the first data product out of the door because we built the platform as we went. But once we did, and we built dashboards on top, it was kind of, okay, this is the next level because now we have almost real-time data on what's going on, and that was really valuable and kind of gave us some. We bought some time as improving to the organization that, hey, this works. This brings a different level of quality. Now you have ownership. Now we understand what's happening, and that allow us to move forward. So.
In our case, as I mentioned, no, we started with 2 main domains. One of the most data-intensive domain. We design and manufacture chargers for EVs, and these chargers are connected to the internet, and they are sending telemetry every few minutes. And this is a key asset for the company for being able to offer more than I would say a black box, okay, but an intelligent system that manages in a smart way the energy, no, and also for efficiently operating the chargers, anomaly detection, and so on. And we were struggling a lot with the data we were receiving from the chargers. In our case, there were lots of teams involved: hardware, firmware, embedded software, backend, and data. Okay, so you see the long chain. So we have tried to put all the teams under the same umbrella, okay, and treat the data as a product. We have identified and elected a product owner for that domain. And also working close together the software teams with data team. It has been a challenge, but we have been moving forward, and we are quite happy.
Maybe I'll just say quickly on top of that, because you asked about success stories, and I guess one of the reasons why someone might look for success stories is to work out applicability. Okay, maybe these kind of companies it works for, and these kind of companies it doesn't. So I think in the case of data mesh, for different reasons, I've seen successes both in scale-ups. So I think your case at Globo is a great example. Okay, here was a small company, it found product market fit, it grew and grew and grew. Okay, data is key to the success of our company, but we need to do something with it to improve our management, to break through. So that's, I won't try to say any more about the Globo case, although there is some, you're kind enough to, write and allow other people to write about it. So there is stuff on the internet about it. The other extreme other end of a company that I've encountered that has had success with data mesh is a company called Roche, which, people might know because it's based in, there's a St. Cugat base as well. And so Roche is the other end because not a scale up, it's a really, really big medical company that's existed over some years. And so if you look on LinkedIn or on the internet, you'll see them writing about their experiences as well. And in their case, rather than the problem being, how do we work out how to split things apart so we can scale better with the data we have? The Roche example, maybe a little bit closer to the Adevinta thing, is we're a big company with many different parts. How do we design a framework to cooperate and join things together to create value that hadn't existed before? So if you're looking for not just the cool hipster scale up type people who can use, who use the cool tech, but people who are well-established companies with, decades of legacy, I'd imagine Roche is another example to look at.
Yeah. Hello. So my question is mostly related to the stage where the data meets the counterparts, like sales department, marketing, or product, which also comes to what Marcus said. It was partly covered by all of you, but I wonder about how we know that that stage is really painful as people working with data. We try to put it in best shape, but when it's comes to the people who requested it, it can really become confusing, also based on the tool that is used as well. So it's like how easy is to make it clear for other counterparts, and also how other departments are replying, like what's their approach, what's their thoughts on implementing that data mesh process. Like,
I have a kind of answer to this, but I don't know if it's really helpful. So apologies in advance. So one of the things I think is tricky there is there are a lot of people in companies today who want to be data driven and understand data without actually being data literate. And I don't think there's a way around that. Like, I don't think no matter how good a dashboard you make, you can't make someone understand things about statistics when they don't understand stuff about statistics. So from an organization point of view, I think part of what we need to do as maybe leaders, maybe, I don't know, is encourage a culture of people not just using numbers as magic spells, but to actually do some work in understanding how numbers work and so on. So like, I think I admire your data product attitude of thinking, oh, how can I best serve my customers? But there's kind of a limit to what you can do on their behalf. I think the common answer that people ask for is a dashboard, right? I don't know how many dashboards have been built by people in this room, but there's probably like thousands of dashboards made by people in this room. I don't know how many of those you'd be proud enough about that you'd want to put a photo of it on your wall, right? And I think the problem with dashboards is people imagine that they want the perfect dashboard because a dashboard is kind of a crystallization of an understanding of a data set. And so they imagine that if someone gives them the right dashboard, someone else has understood the data on their behalf and can give it to them. And so I don't know if there's kind of a way around that other than setting a certain bar of expectation that people who want to be data driven and people who want to consume the data need to also be on a self-education journey. I mean, there's ways you can do it better or worse, but I don't think you can understand on other people's behalf. Sorry, not very helpful, I can see, but yeah. Any other?
Just a super quick one. You also don't have to do it for the whole department at once, right? So like you're picking the like individual people, and usually there is always someone in an area, marketing, sales, that is super data driven and wants to do all of those things. Approach them and like make it with them and scale it through them. So like then you also have someone that is telling you what you actually need to deliver, and you have a very like happy customer that you can only win doing that. And then you can like use like bigger and bigger cycles around those people to make it for the whole sales department.
Any other? Oh, we're getting the audience involved now.
Yeah, because I think this is a really interesting topic, and a word that made me bring was the counterpart. When we talk about sales and when we talk about business units that might look like are far from P&T organizations and data engineering and so on and so forth. But it doesn't have to be like that. And I think somehow data mesh fosters that. And maybe sales needs the data in a specific way that is coming and is going to be built from different domains in P&T, and the resulting data product, sales is not going to be a customer of the data product. They are going to be the owners and the customers at the same time. So in the future, I think we should get used to have data product teams, not just on the domains that are closer to the technology. And this split is easier to see when we're talking about tech companies. But in case Chris was talking about Roche, they sometimes build devices for medical facilities, or they work in labs. In these cases, like not all, like pretty much any domain other than the most modern ones are really techy, and it's easier for them when they do this transition to understand that, okay, we need these data teams, whatever that means, and we have to own it, and we have to fund it, and we have to be close. And of course, we need to understand and we need to learn how to be data driven if we don't have this in our culture.
Something I've seen, I don't have it, but I've seen in big companies that are quite data-driven, data mature. they have these data marketplaces. And this concept of data marketplace, where anyone in the company can use any data set from any other team in the company. And as he said, no, and you're also producing these data sets. And this concept of reusability and seeing that your data, it's not only being used by your people, but also by people in other areas of the company, I think generates lots of value. But it's, as always, it's a culture change.
Okay, here. I have a question about domains, because you mentioned domain as a key concept several times. And we know that domain have something really complex to define, is the boundary context that define what is part of domain and what is not part of domain. Then I have two questions about domains. If you, in your companies, match the domain definition with the organization, and what happens if not? And the second question, if you have overlaps in a definition of domains that consider the same data as part of different domains, and if it happens, how are you facing it?
You want to go?
Sure, it doesn't seem like other people want to answer this first. So I guess the term domain, as probably most people know here, I think is kind of appropriated from domain-driven design. So it's kind of related, but maybe not used in exactly the same way. So if you have business domain organized in a different way than your kind of structure, the lesson that Roche talks about actually in their case study is you're better to start off with the organization of people you have now than to try to rearrange how your whole company works before you feel like you can adopt data mesh, because likely you'll end up trying to change things, not delivering value, annoying a bunch of people, maybe making a bunch of other people scared and uncertain before you get to the actual value. So I think based on their advice and experience, my suggestion would be you're better off aligning yourself with how your human beings are organized and how they set priorities and how the teams are organized than in kind of a business domain purity. Over time, it makes sense for the organization to slowly restructure, hypothetically, around, domain boundaries and stuff rather than around other things. But I think that the nice thing about data products is they're granular enough that you could do things like change ownership of a data product, that if later on you can say, oh, this part of the organization used to live over here, now it lives over here. Once you have data products, it's actually a lot easier to see how to refactor the technical landscape to match the new landscape. All right, so that's one question. The second one was, I believe, what happens if you have more than one area that lays claim to a piece of data? What do you do? I think actually I would say tolerate duplication. So the authenticity of the modeling and the connection is more important than kind of, that MECE principle, mutual exclusion, collectively exhaustive. Collectively exhaustive is really important. Like I said earlier with ownership, someone has to own all the important stuff, but I think you can probably tolerate a bit of overlap. And in the case of, I guess, what Oscar was saying earlier about, different kinds of data for sales, etc., you might actually find, like domain-driven design hints, that in different bounded contexts, data looks like it's the same, but there's like subtle differences that mean that even kind of the same data in different domains. Okay, so that, maybe for sales, there's a customer, and that means a potential customer, and there's not actually a contract signed. So the way you model it doesn't have a contract, because they might be a new customer you don't have yet. But then there's another department for which contract is a mandatory field, because there has to be a contract for every customer, because how can they be a customer? So I think that kind of tolerance of duplication in the interests of being able to make the data modeled authentically for different interests is more important than trying to be like dry and don't repeat yourself. So I'm not saying you want 50 copies of every data and databases out of control. That's kind of an extreme, but I don't think you should make it an ironclad rule that everything must be only in one place, would be my advice.
Yeah, at Global, we actually started just how you mentioned, Chris. We took the business domains and continue like that. But we evolved over that. Like in the end, domain is a construction. And when we did our domain mapping exercise, we figured out that we could go there was no right or wrong. You could go any granularity. You could have a domain that had 5 data products. You could have macro domains, and we started creating like levels and so on. No, let's keep it simple. What does it work now? In the end, the concept of domain needs to be a tag. and something that you can easily change. So it means that domain means that someone, a group of people, is responsible for that domain and has the responsibility to keep those data products updated. If there is a user who has a problem with that, they are accountable for that. That's what a domain means. But at the beginning, for us, we were super rigid on that and how the infrastructure is going to look by domain, and we simplified it a lot because there's no right or wrong, and it's going to be evolving with organization. The way in which we approach it when we were to design those domains is the business looks at, like our organization is maybe organized on business and on product areas, but the data is a bit different. Like we look at how the data flows through the organization, where are the sources, how this is transformed, and we draw our domains that way. Because in the end, what happens is that if you do a business, like if you do a business mapping, then you might end up having the same sources used by 3 different domains and the same group of people. Actually, it's very difficult to get that ownership because everyone is using the same thing. The other way is that if the domains are not aligned, which is part of what we have today, is that you have a data product team, which actually serving multiple business domains. So you make the life harder of, in our case, the data product manager, because they need to be capturing or getting requirements from different places, understanding different areas. Like you don't get that. Either you get the complexity on one end or the other. But we decided that it was more efficient from a data perspective to actually map the data flow and adjust domains to the data flow versus the business flow, because it's very different, like the flow for the customer through the organization than the flow of the data through the organization and so on. And how a product evolves is different than how the data evolves. These are different things.
Maybe just a quick one to this. So like I would also never like change an organization first to then roll out data mesh, and then you're like, okay, now it didn't work. Sorry, we just make a rollback. I recently learned that exactly this question of domains is one of the points where you can really get like what we call now generalist engineers, because this is something they, at least at Mobility, they really care about. It's like, oh yeah, domain-driven design, we should have like more independence internally and so on. And they saw a lot of sparks in their eyes before data mesh, like, yeah, the product. If you like talk about data as a product, you have product managers. If you talk about domains, you actually have the generalist engineers. So therefore, let them go with it. There is at least some kind of structure. If it's bad, then it's also bad for the rest of the technology. And I think one of the concepts is also getting data closer to technology. And this is like share the pain then, and then as one organization change it, or just use what they already came up with. I think that's a good way of starting that.
Okay. With this previous question, my question is a bit strange, but today we were discussing about success factors and pitfalls, and one of the pitfalls we identified is about for these domain teams, these domain teams that now will need to focus in different values. Let's say that they are developing a product for final users of the market, but at the same time, we will be asking them to also manage the value they provide by the data they share to the rest of the domains. So I wanted to ask if you went into this pitfall, and what did you did to bypass. But now I see that you've taken another approach, which is one thing is domains for product business, and then you have other data domains.
Maybe I quickly do this one. I don't think I have the exact answer to this, but there's not like, you still have, your question was if product managers should now also like have data as products, but they also should have like real products.
Yeah, exactly. No, so one of the pitfalls we identified is, okay, how we do for a product manager that is delivering software to also, and on delivering this software, the users are the external users, and then delivering data, the users are internal users, mainly because maybe you also build other products on top, but well, you need to know, you need to get these use cases. And we were saying, this is difficult, no, to do this shift and how to prioritize on value if it is under the same team.
Then I'm going to use my microphone to make the question even harder. Should a product manager and a data product manager owner be the same person or different people?
It looks like you know the answer, right?
Okay. many facets to this. Okay, where do I start? Should they be the same person? We tried. Huh? So we can say we tried and we failed. We came to the conclusion that no. Like you need understanding the life cycle of a product and understanding the life cycle of a data product. It has nuances. It has similarities. And I would say the most important thing is bringing the product thinking into data. That's the 80% of the value, but there's the last 20% that you don't get by default. And possibly we fail to upskill our product managers to be able to manage that data as well. So that can be the case. So I personally believe that if you take one product manager, do nothing, and say now you're going to be managing data as a product, it might not work great. At least it didn't work great for us. Then answering your question, what happens? We're saying that now you have teams for the data, teams for the, but okay. So there are many, let's say, layers of complexity, right? Like for sure that your ideal world is that the same team who is, let's say, they are working on a specific area of the app and they generate some events. You want them to own those events. And those are what we call source-aligned data products. So no transformations, nothing. They are responsible for making sure that lands in a place and that they know who's consuming that and know who to reach out. That's kind of the level that we expect from those people. Now, you're going to be combining those events and creating more, let's say, consumer-aligned or aggregated data products and so on. In our case, we have different teams doing that because, well, a matter of numbers, it doesn't work for us to have the same software engineering teams that are owning different parts of the app, also doing the aggregations for more complex data products and so on. Like we have teams dedicated to that part. So kind of is both in our case.
So I think you've got a very good question there, which I think actually was thought of by Jean-Marc when she was creating Data Mesh. She was like, okay, if we add to the responsibilities of a team, the team is already busy. Is that fair? How can we expect them to add an extra thing to their load? So I'd say it is an inherent tension in Data Mesh, and generally there's like 3 mitigations that happen to make it possible for the team with an end product also successfully own a data product. One is dispersing data engineering skills throughout the organization. So maybe that means they need an extra person added to the team, and that person needs to know how to create Spark pipelines or do other things. And so, the team has more work, but there's more people with more skills. Okay. I think it's important that the backlog that the team has, if the team does have both data product and end product thing, is that it's not 2 different backlogs, because that's going to put individuals under this kind of real pressure about 2 different people who are telling them what to do. So I totally get the pattern you're talking about where you might have different data product owners and product owners, but they should have some point where the backlogs join, so it's clear on the team what's the most important thing to be working on today. The 2 other mitigations besides the skills going to the team, one is the consultancy model that you mentioned. So maybe actually you need this resource as an organization that if you're having trouble with your data products, you need to be able to consult someone who's really experienced with data engineering and who can sort out the problem for you. And so even though the cognitive load is higher, you've got more people helping you out with that load. That's the second mitigation. So the third one is actually the thing that's baked into Data Mesh, which is the self-service data platform. So actually, like, the justification for that existing is, well, how do we take some load off the teams because we're asking them to do one more thing? So I don't think this is a free lunch, but I think that combination of skills joining the team, consultancy model supporting the team with hard things, and a data platform making the job easier is the answer that Data Mesh has so far to make it so that teams don't pull their hair out. And I would say, by the way, that I really encourage you to read the book Team Topologies if you're interested in this, because you're smiling because probably you know, but for the audience, it talks a lot about cognitive load, so too much stuff to keep track of being a massive problem for software people, and talks about different team types as ways to keep cognitive load under control. And so what I was trying to do with my answer, which I guess you figured out, was talk about the different team types in Team Topologies without using that jargon. So I don't think it's a solved problem, but I think that's the best answer we have now. Right, Oscar.
What I'm going to share is my personal opinion on this because this is very controversial, but data mesh fosters getting data closer to the source, but not necessarily at the source. And it depends on what's the size of your teams. If you have 8, 9 people team, probably it's going to be hard to create valuable data products just with your data, other than purely source aligned, and maybe it doesn't pay the effort to take the approach of bringing data capabilities to the team. And there is another approaches between this and central team that might be having data product teams working closely to multiple engineering teams. So if we have in a single domain, maybe we have 3 teams that are really close in terms of the value stream they're working on. We can have a single data product team with, I totally agree, we will need a specific data product manager to handle the product. And this team can own one or multiple data products, sourcing the data from these teams they work closely with. It requires a higher level of collaboration that having the roles embedded on the teams, but it's still smoother than centralized models where we have a bottleneck of this same model, but with a single team working for the whole company. So I would say it depends a lot on the context. If maybe your teams are bigger enough to really have meaningful data where it works to have data product just with that data, or maybe your teams are smaller. Now there's a trend on getting teams even smaller, and people are talking about, no, but we just have 4 or 5 people teams. It doesn't make sense. It just take the data closer to the source and defining ownership in there. It's still under the same domain. I think it's still an improvement, and I would say it matches what the principles of data mesh are proposing.
Oh. Okay. Assuming that we have 2 different teams, one that is in charge of the product, delivering software to the end users, and a product team that maybe is more in charge of developing data products to serve other type of customers inside the company. And also, assuming that we don't have a straight definition for products, but there is a limit that it has to have any business value. Otherwise, well, we are not charity. How do you define objectives for these data product teams regarding to those products? Because somehow I see that, okay, you have a team of people that is able to manage data. You set them an objective, and they engage on discovery in order to achieve that objective by developing these data products. Which would be a nice KPI to look at to measure the success of these data products?
Yeah. So in our organization, we don't look at the success of a data product. We look at the success of a team. The way in which we do that is we look at the impact of teams, and we look at that impact in monetary terms. So the question that we need to answer is, okay, that is your data product. What are you doing with that? And why is that beneficial for the company? Yeah. So it might be the case that with this data product now you are serving, let's say, a dashboard that has X hundred users that without the dashboard would be spending this time or not making any decision, whatever. So you are creating efficiency. You measure that. It might be the case that with this data product, you're actually serving 1, 2, X number of data science models that are bringing value for the company. How much value, how much of that total value are you recognizing based on that data product? The way in which we measure the success of the teams is we push teams to understand what value they are delivering for the company and try to measure that value at team level. So it's not about this data product is doing this. We don't care. We don't measure the impact at data product level. We actually look at, this is a team, what are you doing for the business, and how are you concerned about identifying the value that you are delivering for the business? So we cannot take it one level above. That's how we approach it.
Well, apart from this quantitative approach, it's very similar to what I was mentioning at the beginning about the ROI, okay? And have all the traceability, no, of the impact of your data products. I would also like to add the qualitative part, okay? So do you do an NPS or similar to your data product users? How is their customer or user experience?
One thing that I missed. So when we look at teams, and we look at 3 layers, if you want. Like a team needs to be functional, and we have metrics around how the team is feeling. A team has to deliver impact, and we have metrics about the results, which are going to be different based on how the team, on what the team is working on. And then we're going to have technical excellence metrics, meaning that at team level, you're going to have we have quality monitors on our data product. We have SLAs on our data products, and we also have a kind of percentage of SLAs missed. That's also KPIs that we tracked at more of a kind of aggregated on a team level. How are you managing your portfolio of data products? I miss that.
I think one thing to add, we, from my perspective, shouldn't forget that we already have data products at Adevinta. We have teams that are providing data products to others, recommenders, for example, and they also already had to solve the question of how do you measure your impact. So take what we already have, which is the amount of how often is your data product used in a product. For example, how many users actually use this? What is the time to market? All these kind of things. We don't have to come up with a new. It's just like applying them again.
I got just one bit. So I think all what you're talking about is basically like what's the impact of the data product. So I don't think I have anything to add in terms of the kind of metric, because you mentioned qualitative and quantitative. But maybe one way to think about it is, imagine someone asked the question, well, I have a team, and that team is responsible for generating HTTP responses, and then they do it with HTML. How should I measure that team? And your answer would be, well, okay, so maybe there's some things that are kind of like baked into quality. Maybe they have to have, SLI conformance, or maybe there's kind of response time or something that you can kind of measure in an independent way. But the only real way you can measure the success of this team that is providing a website, right, HTTP responses, is to ask what is it being used for? What are the goals of the people who are using it? And then you have to design context-sensitive metrics for that. So I think it's not easy, especially for platform-oriented teams where you're not directly providing a service to the end customers. So the provenance of the calculation of your impact is a bit more complicated, because you can't just say, okay, we signed up 10,000 new customers thanks to the new website I built. We have to say, okay, I provided this data product which powered this recommender engine, which improved our customer retention, which made the business money. So it is, indirect value is harder to measure, but in the end you have to come back to what is it for, and then be context sensitive in measuring the impact, I think.
Okay, so this was the last questions of the audience. I today gave it really quickly to the audience since I knew there are many questions. But as I'm the moderator, I want to then at least ask the last questions to you, and it's a little bit looking in the direction of the future. As we all know that data mesh is not at the end with the development, right? What do you see ahead in the sense of development, in the sense of trends, in the evolution of data mesh? And how should we prepare as an organization, since we are in the middle of transforming something what is not done completely and understood yet?
Look into the future. All right. Interesting. So I think probably, and this is a little bit of a cliched answer, but I think it's the increased impact of machine learning is the thing that will kind of drive people to have to invest a lot more time in data mesh, and will actually break through the problem of the value being hypothetical, where we say, oh, it'll be cool because we have all these data products, it'll be great. And the business person goes, I don't have anyone complaining about not having that today, so do I need to worry about this? I think that what happens with the kind of the buzz around machine learning, obviously you're all people interested in data, that, just the things that have come out in the last few months are not when machine learning was invented. It's just when they've kind of broken through into public consciousness. But I think what you'll see is the expectation of consumers for intelligence in or every product they use online will make a step change to go up. And that means that everyone at every company will go, well, hang on a second, if the other competitors over there are able to provide that kind of personalization or, conversational interaction with what I'm doing, I need to keep up. So I don't know if I'm giving a technical answer, but I think that the need for intelligence-driven products will make it easier to convince people to invest in things like data mesh, because we won't be able to get away with undata-driven products anymore.
Thank you.
Maybe to add a different or extend that perspective. I think that on the data mesh, this is not so old, and when we started, we all built our own way into data mesh. I think that there's going to be more standard platforms come in, and it's going to make our life easier especially for those who are starting to start having the option of buy, which we didn't have, right? Maybe connecting to what you just said, I see that today data mesh, it has complexity, and I think that AI is going to reduce some of that complexity. Yeah, it's going to help us on quality, it's going to help us on discoverability, it's going to help us on many things that today we have to do. So that's something that I also see happening in data mesh, automating a lot of the governance that it is tedious. So I think there's opportunities there.
Yes, on top of that, so better tooling platforms that will help us have this self-service platform for building the data products. Also, we mentioned before data contracts. I think there is still lots to do there. For instance, I was talking with one people from here that as far as I remember, you use Segment, no? As one of the data sources, and you need to do some tricky things to get metadata out of Segment, no? And to have some kind of data contracts. So I would like to see these SaaS platforms become more friendly with this concept of data contracts.
So thank you, but I know that there are more questions in the room, and I'm pretty sure we will have the chance to do something similar again, because we all see how valuable it is, how many questions you have, and I'm pretty sure we will see you again probably here on stage to answering more of these questions. But for today, unfortunately, we don't have any more time to ask you more questions. But thank you so much. I think I speak for everyone.